Stephen, we know you have been job hunting. Your bonus is docked per company policy. That line dropped in the middle of our quarterly all-hands meeting like a lead balloon. 1 second, we were looking at slide decks showing off our fourth quarter wins. The next, Daniel Henderson, otherwise known as the CEO's son and our brand new head of human resources, was reading my name off a list like he was a sheriff executing a warrant. My video was off, thank God. All anyone could see was the little blue circle with my initials, SM, sitting quietly in the corner of the screen while my 18-year reputation got steamrolled by a kid who once used personality tests as a hiring metric. I did not speak. I did not flinch. I just clicked my pen, leaned back in my leather chair, and jotted down the exact timestamp in my notebook, right between a doodle of an old coffee mug and a half-finished grocery list. Before we go any further, I want to make one thing clear. If you are listening to this and expecting me to scream, throw coffee, or stomp out of the building, you are looking at the wrong guy. I do not do drama. I do compliance. For 18 years, I have been the guy who keeps this place out of federal court. I started back when we operated out of a drafty warehouse with a single copier that jammed if you looked at it wrong. Back then, nobody in management knew what regulatory compliance even meant. It was just me, 5 3-ring binders, and a lot of coffee. I wrote the ethics code, I established the whistleblower protocols, I drafted the vendor agreements that kept us clean, and my reward for nearly 2 decades of silent diligence was a public execution over a web call. The funny part was the accusation itself. Daniel claimed I was actively job hunting. The reality was that I had not touched my professional networking profile since 2021. I had not uploaded a new resume, I had not toggled the open to work switch, and I had not even changed my headshot. But apparently, looking at a former colleague's profile to check a vendor reference was now considered an HR violation because the CEO's son needed a victory to show he was running a tight ship. After the meeting ended, my inbox started buzzing. Several junior analysts sent me private messages. They wrote that they were sorry I had to go through that, and that they did not know Daniel was going to call me out by name. I did not reply to any of them. Not because I was ungrateful, but because in my line of work, you do not leave a paper trail when you are preparing for a storm. The next morning, the retaliatory behavior escalated. I sat down at my desk with my morning coffee and tried to log into the compliance dashboard. I was met with a 403 forbidden error. No email, no telephone call, no heads up from management. When I contacted the technical support desk, the agent muttered some excuse about database migration and said that under the new departmental structure, my account was no longer authorized to access the system. It was the dashboard I had built from scratch, the one that tracked vendor billing anomalies, conflict disclosures, and regulatory filings. But I did not argue with the support tech. Instead, I opened a private notebook I kept at home. I had recently started keeping 2 sets of records. One was on my official work machine, which was clean, professional, and entirely sanitized. The other was in a locked drawer in my study at home, labeled Internal Adjustments. Daniel was moving fast. He was trying to push me out by making my daily routine impossible to manage. It is a classic tactic, what lawyers call constructive discharge under California common law Turner versus Anheuser-Busch, where an employer deliberately creates intolerable working conditions to force a veteran employee to resign. But Daniel did not realize that when you try to burn a man with a match he gave you, you should make sure you are not standing in the middle of a gasoline puddle. That Thursday, during a budget synchronization meeting, the son sat at the head of the table wearing a blazer that looked like it belonged to a junior yacht club member. He announced his new resource optimization strategy. In plain terms, it meant cutting the compliance department's budget and transferring headcount to a new technology initiative run by his former college roommate. The chief financial officer, a practical man named Richard Henderson, who also happened to be Daniel's father, and the CEO, looked slightly uneasy but did not raise an objection. Daniel smiled, convinced he was the smartest person in the room. He explained that we needed to move away from legacy oversight to become more agile. I just sat there and nodded. By Friday afternoon, 6 of my analysts had been reassigned. By the following Monday, my department was down to just me and a single temporary assistant. But here is the thing about people like Daniel. They are so eager to tear down the old walls that they do not bother to check if those walls are load-bearing. Every time they deleted a policy or rerouted an approval path to save time, they left breadcrumbs. They broke database links, bypassed authorization steps, and ignored version controls. It was like watching a group of teenagers remove the seatbelts from a car because they thought the straps looked ugly. I spent my evenings in my kitchen, sipping black tea and reading through Section 5.4.2 of the company ethics manual. It was a section I had written myself 5 years ago. It sat there, quiet and forgotten, waiting. The clause was simple. Any punitive action taken against an employee based on unverified external employment activities would result in an automatic audit and the immediate suspension of the executive bonus pool for that fiscal quarter. They thought they were deleting my authority. They did not realize they were triggering the system that would bring their house down. The teacup clinked louder than it should have against the small saucer. Perhaps my hand was shaking slightly, or perhaps Olivia Vance was simply determined to make her point. Olivia always insisted on meeting at a coffee shop that served pastries on slate boards and charged $9 for a brew. She said it was important to maintain the appearance of success even when dealing with corporate dumpster fires. I sat quietly and stirred my tea, watching the brown liquid swirl in the cup while she adjusted her glasses and stared at the old binder I had placed between us. The binder was gray and faded, with a few coffee stains on the cardboard cover. It was the kind of document people store in the basement, hoping they will never have to see it again. Olivia ran her manicured hand over the plastic spine like she was examining an ancient relic. She had been my legal advisor and friend for over a decade, and she knew the company structure almost as well as I did. "Well, this takes me back," she murmured, flipping the cover open. "This is version 3.1, correct? The one you drafted before they hired the consultant group to rewrite the bylaws." "Page 47, I replied, taking a slow sip. She turned the pages until she found the tab marked compensation policies. Her eyes scanned the text, and I watched her expression shift from professional skepticism to a quiet, satisfied smile. It was exactly the reaction I had hoped to see. Section 5.4.2, she read aloud, her voice dropping to a whisper so the remote workers at the next table would not hear. Any punitive adjustment to employee compensation based on unverified employment search activity shall trigger a mandatory internal audit and void the executive bonus pool for the active fiscal quarter. She closed the binder and leaned forward, resting her elbows on the wooden table. "Stephen, this is absolutely airtight. You wrote this policy when the founders were still worried about hostile takeovers and wanted to prevent rogue executives from pushing out key staff. It was never removed from the active handbook. They used it against me," I said simply. She stared at my face. "What do you mean?" "They invoked the penalty during the quarterly call. Daniel announced that my performance bonus was being withheld because of suspicious external job search activities. He did it in front of the entire company, citing standard operating procedures." Olivia let out a sharp laugh, then quickly covered her mouth. "He did what?" "The kid actually stood up in front of the staff and admitted to violating a core compliance policy that has been on the books for 15 years. I nodded. "He did. I have the recording, the transcription, and the system log showing that the payroll adjustment was made without a verified investigation. According to the bylaws, this action automatically freezes the executive bonus pool pending an independent review." Olivia leaned back, her smile widening. "Daniel just walked straight into a trap that you set 5 years before he even graduated from college." "But Stephen, you have to be careful here. This is not just a policy violation. This is a classic case of constructive discharge under California common law, Turner versus Anheuser-Busch. They are reducing your team, taking away your access, and humiliating you publicly to force you to resign. If you quit, you lose your leverage. If you stay and document every single move, you hold all the cards." "I am not quitting," I said. "I spent 18 years building that compliance framework. I am not going to let a kid who thinks Agile is a substitute for ethics run me out of my own office." "Good," Olivia said, tapping the binder, "because what they are doing also borders on a breach of fiduciary duty. A publicly traded firm cannot systematically dismantle its regulatory oversight division without exposing its shareholders to massive legal liability. If Daniel is gutting your team to fund a vanity project for his friends, he is putting the entire board in jeopardy. We sat in silence for a minute. The coffee shop was noisy, filled with the hum of espresso machines and the chatter of young professionals discussing marketing metrics. I felt a sudden wave of exhaustion wash over me. For months I had been working late, documenting deletions and watching my department get disassembled piece by piece. It was exhausting to play the role of the quiet, obedient victim while planning a corporate execution. "Are you doing okay?" Olivia asked, her voice softening. "I am tired," I admitted, "but I am also focused. I spent my whole career protecting this company from external threats. I never thought the greatest threat would come from the CEO's living room." "That is the way it usually happens," Olivia said, pulling her coat around her shoulders. "The barbarians rarely storm the gates anymore. They just get hired as vice presidents. Do you have the audit trail ready? I have every system log, every email header, and every altered folder permission saved on my home server. I am not leaving anything to chance." She stood up and grabbed her briefcase. "Keep doing what you are doing. Let them think they are winning. The more confident Daniel feels, the more mistakes he will make. And when the time comes to present this to the board, we will make sure they do not have any room to maneuver." I watched her walk out into the chilly autumn afternoon. The gray binder sat on the table before him, a quiet weapon waiting for the right moment to fire. I placed it back in my bag, paid the bill, and headed back to the office. I had a lot of files to archive, and the day was only half over. Her name was Lily, and she was 24 years old. She smelled of vanilla perfume and wore business casual clothes that looked like they had been purchased the previous weekend. And she was the niece of a former department director, which was the only reason she had secured an internship during a hiring freeze. Lily was bright, enthusiastic, and entirely unaware that she was being used as an administrative eraser by the Human Resources Department. She knocked on my office door during my second cup of coffee, holding a digital tablet to her chest like a shield. "Excuse me, are you Stephen?" she asked, her voice filled with first-week energy. "Daniel told me to shadow you for the Legacy Systems cleanup project." I smiled and motioned for her to sit down. "Yes, I am Stephen. Welcome to compliance. What exactly did Daniel ask you to do?" She tapped her tablet screen. "Well, he gave me a spreadsheet of old files. He said I need to delete any document tagged as compliance history that has not been updated since 2021. He told me we are migrating to a streamlined database and need to clear out the database clutter." My heart rate did not change, but my mind went into overdrive. The files she was talking about were not clutter. They were the foundation of our internal control systems. "I see," I said, keeping my tone flat and professional. "That sounds like a large project. Do you mind if I review the spreadsheet?" She handed me the tablet. I scrolled through the list. It was worse than I expected. Daniel had ordered the removal of conflict of interest declarations, past audit findings, and vendor warning letters. He was systematically wiping the company's historical memory, making sure that any past irregularities could never be traced back to current management. It was a complete removal of regulatory safeguards, disguised as a digital cleanup. "This is a very specific list," I said, returning the tablet. "Tell you what, Lily, to make sure we do not lose anything critical by accident, I want you to copy me on every single deletion request you process. Just send a quick notification to my personal work queue before you hit the delete button. It will help us maintain a clean paper trail." "Oh, definitely," she said, beaming. "I was worried I might delete something important. Having you double-check it makes me feel much better." For the next 2 weeks, Lily worked diligently at the desk outside my office. Every time she prepared to purge a file, my system pinged, and every single time before she could execute the command, I downloaded the original document from our backup server and saved it to an encrypted drive on my home network. I named the folder Project Archive. Daniel thought he was being clever. By using an innocent intern to perform the deletions, he could claim ignorance if the auditors ever asked why the historical records were missing. He could blame it on a training error or database migration issues. But he did not realize that Lily was documenting every single order she received. She forwarded every spreadsheet, every Slack message from Daniel, and every email instruction directly to my folder. One Tuesday morning, Lily brought a black flash drive to my desk. "Stephen, Daniel wants me to reformat and upload these old vendor logs from 2017 to 2020. He said the formatting is outdated, but I am not sure how to align the columns. Can you show me?" I plugged the drive into my machine and opened the files. It took me less than 3 minutes to realize what had changed. The columns had not just been reformatted, entire sections had been deleted. Specifically, the documents had been stripped of all records concerning pricing disputes and shipping discrepancies with a logistics provider named Devon and Associates. The original logs showed that Devon and Associates had consistently overcharged us for freight services, and that my department had flagged them for contract violations 3 years ago. The new version that Lily had been ordered to upload made it look like the vendor had a perfect record. I looked at the young intern, who was waiting patiently for my guidance. "Lily, I will handle the formatting on these files myself. It is a bit complex for your training level, and I want to make sure it is done correctly." "Thank you so much," she said, looking relieved. "I really appreciate the help." Once she left my office, I immediately copied the raw files from the flash drive. I compared them side by side with the original records from my home database. The discrepancies were clear and undeniable. Someone had deliberately altered corporate records to hide vendor noncompliance. In the corporate world, this is not just a policy violation. This is a direct breach of fiduciary duty and potential fraud under state law. I printed both versions of the logs. I used a yellow highlighter to mark every deleted row, every altered percentage, and every missing warning note. I placed the documents in a red folder labeled Vendor Discrepancies and locked it. In my drawer, Lily returned to her desk, completely unaware that she had just delivered the evidence I needed to prove intentional record tampering. She continued her database cleanup, sending me notification after notification. While I quietly rebuilt the scaffolding they were trying to tear down, they thought they were erasing their past, but they were only creating a detailed roadmap of their own misconduct, and I was holding the map. The confrontation over the obsolete policy happened on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. I was reviewing the quarterly vendor ledger when a message popped up from Paige, Daniel's administrative assistant. Paige was 28, wore expensive designer glasses, and communicated almost exclusively in abbreviations and passive-aggressive office jargon. She was the kind of employee who believed that a digital thumbs up was a legally binding response. "Hey Stephen," she wrote, "Daniel noticed you referenced Section 3.2.8 in the latest vendor review. Just so you know, that policy is obsolete now. Please use the new streamlined templates. Thanks." I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. I looked out the window at the parking lot. Below, Daniel's leased sports car, a luxury sedan that cost $80,000, sat gleaming in the sun. It was the physical manifestation of his administrative priorities. Section 3.2.8 was the policy requiring dual signature approvals for any vendor invoice that exceeded $15,000. Without it, department heads could approve their own vendor contracts without oversight from my team. It was the only line of defense preventing executives from treating the company accounts like their personal bank files. I opened our Active Directory, pulled up the metadata for the policy index, and took a screenshot. The system showed that Section 3.2.8 had never been deactivated. It was still active, legally binding, and required under our corporate bylaws. I typed a reply. "Thanks, Paige. The system shows the policy is still active and has not been sunsetted by the board. Can you send me the documentation showing when the change was authorized?" 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, she sent back a thumbs-up emoji. No explanation, no document, no follow-up. I saved the screenshot, the chat log, and the time-stamped message. I added them to a spreadsheet on my private drive titled Compliance Anomalies. That same afternoon, I decided to look into the payments made under the new streamlined process. I pulled the general ledger for the past 2 months and sorted the transactions by department. One entry caught my attention immediately. It was an invoice for $19,500 paid to a consulting firm listed as Devon and Associates. The billing address was a shared workspace in Tampa, Florida. The description of services was brief: strategic realignment and pipeline optimization. The invoice had been approved by a single signature, Daniel Henderson. I searched the corporate registry for Devon and Associates. The company had been registered only 4 months prior, on a Tuesday morning using a standard online template. The principal officer listed on the state website was a man named Devin Vance, who also happened to be a close personal friend of Daniel. I kept digging. I found 2 additional invoices from the same firms, each just under the $20,000 limit that would have triggered an automatic corporate review. One was for emergency brand alignment for $14,800. The other was for cultural diagnostics for $17,200. In total, over $50,000 had been paid to Daniel's friend for deliverables that consisted of nothing more than vague strategy summaries. I printed every invoice, every state registry document, and the organizational chart showing Daniel's relationship with Devon. I cross-referenced the transactions with the company's internal control policies. The payments were a direct violation of our conflict of interest guidelines and constituted a clear breach of fiduciary duty. I put all the documents into the red folder next to the highlighted vendor logs. The file was growing larger, and so was the list of people involved. Daniel was not just trying to force me out because he disliked legacy systems. He was trying to get me out of the way so he could route company funds to his associates without anyone asking questions. Later that afternoon, Lily came into my office to ask about the dual signature rule. She was genuinely curious, and I took the time to explain the legal reality. A fiduciary duty is a legal obligation to act in the best interest of another party. In our case, the executives have a fiduciary duty to the shareholders. When they bypass controls, they violate that duty. She nodded, taking detailed notes in her leather pad. Meanwhile, the departmental changes continued. Daniel hosted weekly meetings where he spoke about modernizing our operations. He stood at the whiteboard, drawing circles and arrows, telling the remaining staff that we needed to move fast and break things. I sat in the back of those meetings and said nothing. I did not point out that the things he was breaking were the legal shields protecting the company from regulatory penalties. I did not mention that his new streamlined workflows had caused our compliance adherence ratings to drop from 98% to 73% in less than 3 months. I just watched, documented, and waited. I knew that the chief financial officer was starting to notice the budget variances. Richard Henderson was a conservative executive who cared deeply about the bottom line, even if he was blind to his son's incompetence. Every evening, I sent a summary of my findings to my personal email address. I used harmless subject lines like dinner menu options or weekend chore list to avoid detection by the company's automated security filters. Inside the emails were the raw facts: timestamps, file paths, and transaction numbers. By the end of the month, the red folder was nearly full. I added a small sticky note to the cover, evidence of systemic policy bypass. They believed I was a defeated executive, quietly waiting for my retirement. They had no idea that the quietest person in the room was the one preparing to shut down the entire operation. The quarterly budget alignment meeting was held in the executive conference room on the 5th floor. The air smelled of expensive coffee and dry erase markers. Richard Henderson sat at the head of the table, his expression grim as he reviewed the financial reports. Daniel sat to his right, leaning back with a confident smile, looking like a man who believed he was about to receive a promotion. About 40 minutes into the presentation, the chief financial officer tapped his pen against his pad. "Why have our compliance adherence ratings fallen by 25% this quarter?" he asked, looking directly at Daniel. "That is a significant drop." Daniel cleared his throat and adjusted his tie. "Well, Father, we are transitioning away from outdated, slow methodologies. Stephen's department has been slow to adapt to our new workflow structures, which has caused some temporary delays. We expect to realign next quarter." I waited for him to finish. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the red folder. "Actually," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I have the data right here. I slid the folder across the table toward the chief financial officer. Daniel's smile flickered, but he remained quiet, assuming I was simply presenting a routine report. "These are the detailed compliance logs for the past 3 months," I explained. "The decline is not due to transition delays. It is the direct result of systematic policy bypass. Over 30 critical compliance controls have been deactivated without authorization. Additionally, internal records have been altered to hide vendor discrepancies." The chief financial officer opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. He stopped when he reached the section on Devon and Associates. The silence in the room lasted for 2 full minutes. The chief financial officer stared at the figures, his jaw tight. "What is this?" the chief financial officer asked, his voice dropping. "It is a series of invoices totaling over $50,000 paid to a consulting firm registered to Daniel's Associates," I said. "These payments were approved without the required dual signatures, in direct violation of Section 3.2.8. I have also included the original vendor warning logs that were removed from the database." Daniel stood up, his face turning red. "This is just administrative paperwork. Stephen is trying to sabotage our modernization efforts because he cannot keep up with the changes." I did not look at him. I kept my eyes on the chief financial officer, who was now staring at his son with a mixture of anger and disbelief. He held up a single hand, silencing his son instantly. The next morning was the formal board meeting. I did not attend, but I had prepared the final document. Using my administrative privileges, I had uploaded a PDF titled Compliance Clause 5.4.2 Policy Violation Report directly into the shared folder reserved for the external auditor. The document contained everything: the recording of the all-hands meeting where my bonus was docked, the system logs showing the unauthorized adjustment, the invoices for Devon and Associates, and the exact text of the ethics policy I had written years ago. According to the board minutes I received later, the external auditor opened the document halfway through the meeting. He read it silently for a moment, then stopped the presentation. He looked at the CEO, then at the board members, and let out a quiet chuckle. He slid the document across the table to the chief financial officer, who went completely pale as he read the final paragraph. "Oh my God," the CEO whispered. The auditor explained the situation to the board. Under Section 5.4.2 of the company bylaws, the retaliatory docking of a compliance officer's compensation, without a formal, documented investigation, triggered an automatic suspension of the entire executive bonus pool. The board chair immediately called for a recess. By the afternoon, an emergency resolution had been passed. The executive bonus pool for the quarter was officially frozen, pending a full external investigation. Daniel's career at the company ended that week. He was quietly removed from his position as head of human resources and reassigned to an inactive division, with no authority and no budget. The consulting contracts with Devons and Associates were terminated immediately, and the matter was referred to external counsel for review of potential breach of fiduciary duty. I received a brief email from the chief financial officer on Friday afternoon, asking me to meet him in his office. His office had tall mahogany bookshelves and a leather sofa. He looked tired and defeated. He admitted that he should have paid more attention to compliance, and that Daniel's actions had exposed the company to severe legal liability. He asked me to restore the original compliance dashboards and resume my oversight of all vendor approvals. There was no formal apology, but my bonus was restored to my account by Monday morning. I sat at my desk and looked out the window at the city skyline. My compliance dashboard was active again, the numbers glowing green on the screen. Lily, the intern, was still at her desk, working on a new policy checklist under my supervision. They had tried to erase my 18 years of work because they thought rules were just obstacles to be bypassed. They forgot that the rules are what keep the building from collapsing. And they forgot that the person who built the foundation is the only one who knows which pillar holds up the roof. I leaned back and smiled. In the end, the rules always win.